It's the middle of the night. There's no furnace humming, no blanket fresh out of the dryer, no thermostat you can bump up 2 degrees without even opening your eyes. Just cold. Real cold. The kind that gets into your bones and doesn't leave. And you're not inside a house. You're outside, in a world locked in an ice age, and the temperature has dropped below freezing hours ago. So how did ancient humans not simply die? For most of human history, there was no central heating, no insulated walls, no down jackets, no electric blankets, and yet humans survived ice ages. Actual ice ages, where glaciers covered entire continents, and average temperatures were 10 degrees colder than today. They didn't just survive, they spread into some of the coldest places on Earth. Siberia, the Arctic Circle, the mountains of Europe during full glacial conditions, places where a single unprotected night could kill an adult in hours. So what did they actually have? Let's start with fire. Not campfire for fun fire. Fire as infrastructure. Archaeological evidence from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa shows controlled fire use going back roughly 1 million years. That's not a typo. Long before modern humans even existed, some hominin ancestor had already figured out how to keep a flame alive on purpose. By the time we get to actual Ice Age humans, fire wasn't a discovery anymore. It was a daily, hourly responsibility. Someone was almost always awake tending it because if the fire died at 3 a.m. in a glacial winter, people died with it. Groups learned which woods burned hot and fast, which burned slow and steady, and which materials, like dried dung or peat, could stretch a dying fire through an entire freezing night when wood ran short. Next, clothing. And this is where it gets clever. In 2016, researchers analyzing a site in Denisova Cave in Siberia found a bone needle over 50,000 years old, with an eye small enough to thread with fine sinew. That single object tells you something huge. These weren't people draping loose furs over their shoulders. They were sewing, fitted clothing, layered garments, sleeves, hoods, multiple layers trapping warm air against the skin, the same way modern thermal layering works, just built from hide, fur, and sinew thread instead of polyester. Some reconstructions suggest Ice Age humans in Siberia wore up to 4 layers, including insulated boots stuffed with dry grass, functioning almost exactly like a modern winter boot liner. Fur choice mattered too. Wolverine fur, for instance, resists frost buildup from breath and sweat better than almost any other pelt, which is why it still shows up on cold weather parka hoods today. Ancient tailors seem to have understood this instinctively, choosing furs based on where on the body they'd be worn. Then there's shelter, and this one surprises people the most. In Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered structures built almost entirely from mammoth bones. Skulls stacked as a foundation, tusks curved into a dome frame, the whole thing likely covered in hides and packed with turf or snow for insulation. Some of these bone structures are estimated to be over 15,000 years old. Building a shelter out of mammoth bones wasn't decoration. It was engineering. A windbreak, a heat trap, a way to turn open freezing ground into something closer to a room. Building one required dozens of massive bones, which meant either scavenging a mammoth graveyard or, more likely, planning a shelter around the remains of animals hunted over months or years. This wasn't improvised, it was a long-term construction project. Many groups also dug down before they built up. Semi-subterranean dwellings, partly sunk into the earth, used the ground itself as insulation, since soil holds temperature far more steadily than open air. Combine that with a hide roof and a fire pit near the entrance, and you've got something that, while nowhere near a modern home, kept people meaningfully warmer than sleeping exposed on the surface. Smoke had to be managed carefully too, vented just enough to avoid suffocation, while keeping as much heat trapped inside as possible. A balance that took real skill to maintain night after night. And then there's the body itself, human biology adapted. Some populations that lived through extreme cold for generations show evidence of adaptations, like increased brown fat activity, tissue that burns energy specifically to generate heat rather than store it. Neanderthals, who thrived in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, had shorter limbs and stockier builds compared to modern humans. A body shape that retains heat more efficiently by reducing surface area relative to body mass. Their wide nasal passages are thought to have helped warm freezing air before it ever reached the lungs. Cold wasn't just something they endured. Over generations, it shaped their skeletons, their metabolism, their entire physical form. So let's put all of this together and reconstruct a winter night. The fire is burning low, but alive, fed just enough to last until dawn. You're wearing layered furs, maybe 3 or 4 separate garments. Hood up, boots packed with dry grass for insulation. You're not alone. You're pressed against several other people inside a shelter dug slightly into the ground. Walls built from hide stretched over bone or wood, packed with snow on the outside for extra insulation, because snow, strange as it sounds, actually blocks wind and holds in warmth. Someone stays semi-awake, watching the fire, not because they enjoy it, because letting it die is not an option. Every hour or two, they add a little more fuel, just enough. Too much, and you burn through your supply before morning. Too little, and the cold creeps back in. This is a skill. This is knowledge passed down, tested by trial and error, and by people who didn't survive learning it. Children are taught early which sounds a healthy fire makes, so they can wake an adult the moment it starts to fail. In the morning, the group checks the fuel supply. If it's low, someone goes out to gather more wood or dried dung, which burns slower and longer. Clothing gets adjusted based on the day's tasks. Heavy layers for a still day near camp. Slightly lighter, more mobile layers, if there's hunting or gathering to do. Because moving generates its own heat, and overdressing while working hard means sweating. And sweating in freezing air is genuinely dangerous. A damp layer next to the skin can turn a survivable night into a fatal one. Nobody sleeps alone. Body heat is currency. The very young and very old sleep closest to the fire, and closest to other bodies, because they lose heat fastest. This isn't sentimentality. It's thermal math, worked out over generations without a single thermometer. Positions shift through the night too. People rotating so no one stays on the coldest edge of the group for too long. An unspoken rule enforced simply by everyone understanding what cold does to a body left unprotected. Then, around 10,000 years ago, agriculture changed the equation. Permanent settlements meant permanent walls. Walls meant you could build a hearth that didn't have to be portable, didn't have to be abandoned every few weeks when the group moved on. Fixed homes meant thicker construction, smoke holes, sometimes even early forms of underfloor heating in parts of the ancient world. Stone channels running beneath floors to carry heat from a central fire through an entire home. Heating stopped being a constant, minute-by-minute survival task and slowly became infrastructure, something built into your house instead of something you had to manage every single hour just to stay alive. Today, you complain about a draft under the door. You adjust a thermostat without leaving the couch. Ancient humans regulated their body temperature through fire management, fitted clothing sewn by hand, shelters built from the bones of enormous animals, and the simple, constant presence of other people pressed close for warmth. They didn't have insulation in the modern sense. They were the insulation for each other, every single night, for tens of thousands of nights in a row, across generations, who never once saw a furnace or felt a heated floor. You've never had to keep a fire alive to survive until sunrise. You've never had to decide whether burning through tonight's fuel means freezing tomorrow. You've never had to press your body against a stranger's just so both of you would still be breathing by morning. Just fire, just fur, just bone and hide and each other. That was the entire heating system for roughly 300,000 years, and it worked well enough that you exist to read this sentence in a heated room, mildly annoyed that it's 68 degrees instead of 70.